This is the agree to disagree, and before I get into the rest of it, which John and I have a topic, John has the topic and I'll join in. Just to remind you that if you watch the early showing of this, it does run for 2 weeks, this show, but on September 15th, on a Sunday from 1 to 5 at the Borden Colony, is Raynham Pride Day. We always get a huge turnout for that, so I expect that most of you know about it already, but if you were saying, gee, when's Raynham Pride Day? I said, well, that's a good question. It's on September the 15th from 1 to 5 at the Borden Colony. I don't have to tell you where in the Borden Colony. Follow the crowd. My name is Don McKinnon again, and I am one of two partners, and this evening we have as a subject, John. Your name is John.
My name is John Cochran. Thank you for joining us again this evening. And the first topic that we have for you is one that I'm sure you're very keyed into, and that is the potential strike on Syria by our country. I have some thoughts on that. Dawn has some thoughts on that as well. So I'd like to go through some of the things that I put down just to kind of establish a basis for the conversation, and then we can add additional thoughts as we have them. First of all, I hate to say it, but it seems to me that the overall foreign policy under this administration has been a disaster. I don't think you can look at it any other way. President Obama now is viewed around the world as a weak leader. Remember, it was President Obama that coined the phrase, lead from behind. Exactly what does that mean? I still don't know what that means. Do you know what that means?
I have no idea. He didn't call.
It's kind of an oxymoron.
He did not share that with me, so I'm not sure what he meant.
The bottom line is that our enemies no longer fear us, and our allies no longer feel that they can rely on us. Now, President Obama has backed us into a corner by drawing a red line, which you've heard so much about, with Syria, on the use of chemical weapons in their civil war. Now, my grandfather once told me years ago that a tiger without teeth shouldn't growl. Up until now, the president has come across as a toothless tiger. Now we are contemplating attacking Syria to save the pride of the president for his red line comment. Now, make no mistake, there's a lot of obfuscation here. There's a lot of reasons given for this assault, but at the heart of it is the fact that President Obama came out and said that if Syria crossed the red line, there would be consequences, his consequences. Our current situation is highly complex, but I'm against this so-called limited attack of, quote, limited duration with no boots on the ground, unquote, for many reasons. First and foremost, this is a civil war. There's no direct threat to us. This is also, unfortunately, primarily a war of bad guys, fighting bad guys. It didn't start out that way, but that's what it's evolved into. The American people are overwhelmingly against the attack. You probably heard on TV various representatives speaking and saying that they haven't gotten one call in their district from a resident that was for this attack. And I think the last poll that was out indicated that the American people say no to this attack, 70% to less than 30%. Now, the White House has not given a follow-up strategy or an end game if our attack creates unintended consequences. And that's what we have really no information about. We don't know what the unintended consequences might be. They might be horrendous. Also, not to be set aside, Russia has condemned any U.S. attack on Syria. Now, Syria is one of only a few Russian allies in the Mideast. Russia has pledged to provide Syria with a missile defense system if the United States attacks. A United States attack could result in Syrian and Iranian retaliation on Israel and other U.S. allies, as well as U.S. embassies in the Mideast and elsewhere. The number of civilians projected to be killed in the attacks, our attacks, including more children, apparently have been calculated by the United States, but not revealed to the American public. Why not? Thanks to President Obama's attack warning to the world and plentiful lead time to act, the Syrian regime has been able to move and secure its war assets and place children and other civilians around its immovable assets that U.S. missiles might strike. The attack is projected to weaken the Syrian regime. But think about it. There's no guarantee that a rebel victory would make Syria any better off given the al-Qaeda-linked rebels fighting in the war. These radical elements could get their hands on the huge chemical weapons stash in the country and use them anywhere on the globe, including us. Would that be worse than what we have now? At least as far as we know, Assad, the president of Syria, has only used the chemical weapons in his own country. But imagine if al-Qaeda got their hands on these weapons. Now, if they did get their hands on these weapons, a regime overthrow could require U.S. boots on the ground to locate and secure these chemical weapons. The cost of the attack has been estimated in the tens to hundreds of millions. The UN, United Nations, NATO, and our allies, including our biggest ally in the world, Britain, have decided not to participate in the attack. This is the first time Britain has not participated with the U.S. in this sort of attack in 100 years. Why should we sacrifice our blood and treasure of our sons and daughters if our missile attack causes an escalation of the war? In effect, we continue to be the policemen of the world. I'd like to know, where is that duty mentioned in our Constitution? If we want to attack a country, let's attack Iran's nuclear facilities and remove this real doomsday threat to the world, including to the U.S., before it's too late. Dawn, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, John. This is a one which we agree to agree on.
Yes, one of the few.
Maybe, however, there's a caveat, a little see below, quite heavy on Obama as the cause for this. There is a domino theory to politics, unfortunately. One follows the other, and I believe that Bush, too, left Obama with the situation that it was very difficult to overcome. I will agree with you that probably he hasn't shown enough ability to get himself out from under what he was left with, but the point of it is he was left with that, and not just to constantly go back to President Bush and tie the whole thing to him. But there has been a tendency since, first of all, let's understand one thing. We have not had a legal war since World War II. And Franklin Roosevelt, a day to live in infamy. December 8, he declared it after December 7. Congress concurred, war declared on Germany and Japan. 1945 or 6, which depending on which calendar you're working off of, that was the last legal war we had. The problem that we run into, and now it's very interesting, by the way, to watch the Congress. And for people who have been criticizing President Obama on decision-making, suddenly have to make decisions on their own. It is interesting the way some people who can tell you what to do as long as it isn't binding. But once it's binding, it wasn't as easy maybe as they thought it was. Watch the Congress flipping back and forth on their opinions now. It's enough to make you wonder whether they're the same guys that this time last week had the answer. but they did have the answer this time last week. So to be a president, I'll give this to Bush, I'll give it to Truman, I'll give it to all of these people that put us into undeclared wars. It's not easy. I think you and I aren't trying to say that it is an easy job to do. But nonetheless, these undeclared wars, I have been saying for many, many years, those wars have to come to an end. Not just this war. You, in a very professional manner, have said, why not this war? Did I miss? I think also because it's a civil war. It's internal with them. Let's just say poison gas. Let's start off with that. Is that terrible? I'm probably one of the few people around who knew somebody who was poison gassed. My Uncle Leo, I am Donald Leo McKinnon, and my Uncle Leo was gassed in World War I and paid for that with, he lived until he was almost 90, but he went to the hospital on a regular basis. It was not a quality of life that he would have had if he wasn't gassed with poison gas. So I understand poison gas firsthand. I'm not trying to say it's proper that they use. As a matter of fact, because of Uncle Leo and people like that, it's not legal. But Africa, third world countries, they were using poison gas on them. I don't remember Obama or Bush or any of these presidents suddenly becoming holier than thou on the morality of using poison gas. Of course, it's something which. But one thing I am interested.
Well, none of those presidents, John, indicated up front a red line. Let's not forget the red line aspect. I think that's more important than a lot of other people realize.
Most of us have, at one time or other. I used to always say I was born with my tongue in my cheek and my foot in my mouth.
Yeah.
And most people, if they talk long enough, and presidents have a tendency to do that for a living, put their foot in their mouth. I would say that was a foot in the mouth.
But when you make a threat like that on the international stage,
but that didn't make anything different
a lot
from
comes
what.
with that.
Well,
because what it does
you
now
mean
is
for him?
Well, yes, for him, but also for the credibility of the United States, because he represents the United States. Now, I agree with you. The gas is a horrendous thing. My heart bleeds for those kids.
Yeah. Oh.
That were killed.
And for those in Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those in Africa.
Unfortunately, we didn't feel it was too much of
at all.
Evidently, we must have had other things.
Exactly.
Worried about the economy.
Another point that came out of this, and it's very, very true. Poison gas is a terrible thing, but first of all, there wasn't an international law passed. They never used the term law. They called it a norm. Everybody agreed that you shouldn't use poison gas. And interestingly, Syria never participated in that original agreement about poison gas. Add that to the fact that there's a maniac over there running their country who's willing to slaughter all his people to hold on to power. And of course he's going to use whatever sources that as means to try to hold on to that power. And it shouldn't be up to us alone. Remember, we're doing this alone. My goodness, even Bush went out to the Congress and got approval for his actions. Clinton went to the Congress and got approval for his actions. Not only wasn't Obama going to go out to get approval from the Congress initially, he still maintains that even if Congress votes it down, he may do it anyway.
Because he can.
I don't know about that.
Well,
there's a lot of debate on that issue, and I'll tell you why. There's no declaration.
You don't believe that Bush went on his own to do that? I'm trying to remember. John, you got to do a little.
No, he got approval from the Congress in his exploits, and they were in there with him. Now,
I think it's time to do a little research,
well,
and maybe somebody out there can.
We could certainly do that. Yeah.
But I don't recall Congress giving the approval on these actions. I think they just went ahead and did them.
Well,
and I don't think Truman got approval. And that's why Truman was smart enough to call it a police action. Yeah. These other people, I guess they call it a war because Bush too said,
it's a war
we've won a war.
We're attacking a sovereign country and they haven't attacked us. If you lob these...
That's true, John. You just said it.
If you lob
Bush
these cruise
attacked
missiles,
a country that didn't attack us.
Yeah,
and we've
yeah, but Bush thought there was all kinds of weapons over there. Everybody believed that. Congress believed that.
No, John,
Because-
everybody didn't believe it because there was a young man that came
Congress-
back and told them
Congress
it,
backed
it wasn't
Bush.
so.
Congress backed Bush
Okay.
in terms of
We,
Iraq.
we have to get a
because
white
of
paper
those
on this
weapons.
thing. Okay, we have
All
to
right.
get a white paper on Congress
All right.
approving it.
But
I
how
don't
about
recall.
the 100,000
I must
people?
have had a head cold that day. I had a very head cold.
Oh.
So
How
when
about-
Congress, the day Congress voted to approve it.
How about the 100,000 people that died before they used the poison gas? And an estimated
Oh,
4,000
you know,
kids.
we're mixing
in other
apples and
words,
pears here. I'm not saying that, I'm
Why
agreeing
move
with
in
you.
now because of the poison gas is all I'm saying. And we're doing it alone, and
Yeah.
it makes no sense. And the American people definitely
Oh, I think
do not
Obama got
want it.
himself stuck out there on a limb. I'm not
Absolutely.
disagreeing with you
Yeah.
on that. But I'm
A
saying that
tiger with a growl.
this country of ours, and I think you touched on it
Yeah.
when you said, when did we become the policemen of the world?
That's right.
But I'm
Well,
telling
we
you,
have
there's
been
a
the
lot of
policemen of
people
the
in the barber shops and the local bar rooms and everybody else who believe we are the policemen
Oh,
of the world.
absolutely.
This is a given.
Yeah.
We are the policemen of the world.
But you know,
Are we the policemen of the world?
No, we shouldn't be. Why
Well,
should we be?
the point is that if they, the thing is that we've got to find an interest. And when they said we were in these wars because of oil, we were adamant to say, oh, no, we're not in there because of oil. Then why are we in there? You know, it depends on what part of the world you were in, what we use for an excuse.
Oh, I agree.
And one of them, the other one was, if you recall, it was called the domino theory.
Yeah.
And the domino theory was, if we don't get involved in Vietnam, then Cambodia, and you go right down the list of line, or we are involved in Vietnam now, they make all our clothing.
Vietnam, that's right. I was going to say, Vietnam is a good example of why we shouldn't be policemen of the world. We shouldn't have gone into Vietnam either.
That's right.
But we did go into Vietnam, and I lost some very, very close people because that was my
Era.
generation.
Yeah, German, yeah.
And what happened? Not only did we lose the war because we finally gave up on it and backed out of it, once we started it, we should have done something to finish it, in my opinion, but we backed out. My two friends are dead. They died at an early age, and you're absolutely right. We're trading with Vietnam like we trade with Canada.
It'd be interesting to find
So-
out
so
how they're
why?
doing, because there's a communist country. For the basic rule, communism doesn't work.
That's right.
The prime
That's why there's
communist
only,
countries
less
of,
than, 3 or 4 communist countries left.
but if
China,
Vietnam, the question
Cuba.
is, yeah, well, and China, I'm not sure they are anymore. That's another. That's for another, not another
Yeah.
day. We talk about that today if we want to.
Well,
because
China
who's telling us not
China
to?
sent a ship in here now, too. That's the other thing. I didn't mention that in here, but Russia's sending ships in here.
Yeah.
China's sending ships
I
in
know.
here. Do we want to get into a situation where we could possibly escalate this thing? Then the boots will be on the ground. Then there will be more blood and treasure from the United States. And we haven't done too good leading from behind. I don't know if you've noticed.
I don't know. Is that what did that mean? Did you decide what leading from behind
I
means?
have no idea.
Okay.
And if anyone can tell me what
All
it
right.
means, I'd be happy to hear it.
But
It's
see,
an
here's
oxymoron, isn't it?
something that no, you're not. You're an independent, so I can't say you're a Republican. You are an independent. But I don't know of any Republican people that I know who have ever said as many nice things as they're saying now about the United Nations. They don't like so the United Nations didn't back them. What do you mean you don't like the United Nations? You like the United Nations, though, right, John?
No, I think the United Nations is very ineffective.
There you go. Welcome. But see, in the word of debate, suddenly they become worth. They didn't even say. But I agree with you now on your stand on United Nations,
Yeah.
and I have believed that for quite a while. If the United Nations isn't going to get involved in this,
Right.
now I understand the.
Well,
the
what about
sea up
NATO, though?
above.
NATO could have gotten involved. They didn't get involved either. Britain voted it down, Don. Are you kidding me?
You know what they say, that the people are always ahead of the politicians.
Yeah.
And this time, NATO, United Nations, Europe are all ahead of the politicians in the United States of America. That we are now by ourselves because we're acting by ourselves because we don't get it. And there are times when people don't get it. And the reason I think that most of the European nations and all get it is they understand that this is a tribal or religious war, which we are, be it Europe, UN, third man in and a two-man fight. And people really don't want to do that anymore. I don't blame them.
Absolutely.
Now, somehow or other, France seems to, who would have figured? France seems to think we're doing okay.
It's
I don't
amazing,
understand
isn't it?
I don't understand
Not
that.
one of our biggest allies over the years, but certainly with us.
And
over
they were the ones, however, when MacArthur rather said about eliminate the draft, which now we've done. How we doing? Well, one of the things, and also this may be an aside, but it really isn't. Before we get involved in wars, the wars recently are the first ones that we didn't have enough boots to go to war.
Well, that's very true, too.
And because we didn't have enough boots, those boots had to keep going back, going back,
Yeah.
going back. And because of that, World War I would be battle fatigue, or
Right.
they had different names for it, different wars. But how could majority of these people that are coming back now not have breakdowns as a result of this, of which the United States has never been good at servicing returned veterans with mental
No,
illness.
and that we see that happening right now with our returned veterans.
Because that's what we do.
It's incredible.
That's what the
delays to get help.
They had to, Walter Reed Hospital, supposedly the prime,
Right.
was investigated and found out
Yes.
how terrible the condition was. So the United States is enough to be worried about taking care of its veterans.
I think a good acid test, if you will, would be to say, you don't have a son. If you had a son, would you want your son to go fight this war?
Oh, I have two sons. I don't want either one of them to
Okay.
go over.
All right.
No.
Would you don't want
No.
either one of them to
No,
go over?
no.
I mean, when you look at the wars that we fought after World War II, and you're very correct, that was the last real war.
Yeah.
Even Korea wasn't a real war.
Korea, well, you're
And
correct
right now
in that
the
sense. It
war's
was a
not
police
over.
action, yeah.
It was
It
not
was
over.
a police action.
And then, of course, we had the two Gulfs, and we had Iraq, and we're fighting this thing, or about to fight this thing. But I can tell you this, of all of these police actions or attacks or whatever they
Whatever you
were
wanna
after
call 'em,
World
yeah.
War II,
Yeah.
this one has the least reason to go in my opinion. The least reason, based upon the knowledge that we have.
You know, it's interesting. A general that I was not pleased with politically, I have to say politically, because there were two generals going into World War II that became famous in the United States, and one was MacArthur in Asia, and the other was Eisenhower
Right.
in Europe. Eisenhower came in as a colonel. He wasn't even a general
Yeah.
with 1 star when the thing started. He ended up with 5 stars. But the reason...
Don't forget my favorite General Patton. by
Well,
the way.
Patton was a warrior. He was a warrior.
He sure was.
But these other two guys were administrators. But the point of it is that
Right.
Eisenhower was looked down on by MacArthur, and because of that, and he was a Republican. And therefore, because he fired Eisenhower, which he did, he sent him home and fired him. Because he did that, the Democrats took a liking to Eisenhower. From out of the blue, Eisenhower came in. And where I took offense at Eisenhower was the fact that he was an ingrate in that sense. As a matter of fact, one time when he was running as a Republican, he made the statement, when I was a boy, the Democrats were the town drunks. And they said, well, you got to stop saying that because you may need a couple of them voting for you, you know. So, and Harry Truman really took offense to him because Truman and Roosevelt were the two that made him what he was. But so I had offense with him politically. But having said that, he was an administrator. He's creator of our interstate highway.
Yeah, yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And the other thing he said was, watch out for the CIA and the military. They will tend to create an industry that
Right.
you won't be able to control. Believe me, John, it is my belief that Eisenhower was as correct on that as anything he's ever said. That's where we are now. And that is why we end up going into these silly little wars
should stay out of
because of
them.
the military.
We don't have the military we used to have.
No.
We've got about half of the strength that we used to have. And our economy is still a mess. Don't forget the cost of this stuff. I mean, these missiles are $1 million a piece. Are you kidding me? Where are they going to fall? Where are they going to hit?
And that is why the quality of life in some of these smaller countries is going so well, because
Yeah.
they have no military. What we did for Japan and Germany was really something which was wonderful for them.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I've read within the last month that there are those who are attempting to get Japan to build a bigger army,
Yes, I read that also.
and I'm saying, you really
don't
don't,
wanna do
want
that again,
Japan. No, well, they're wonderful.
Yeah.
Don't give them a bigger army.
Yeah.
Because Germany and Japan are countries that are locked, and they can be easily controlled to things getting into their country. That's one of the reasons they went into World War II. And so once you start to play with them a little bit, they can get nasty. They're nasty foes. So leave them alone. But the thing
I
of it
agree.
is that we keep acting like a military country. We weren't meant to be a military country. We were, and now I talked to you over the phone just for a minute because we see what we're going to talk about. And I said, in my elder years, I'm becoming sort of a pacifist. And you said you were too.
I
and
am.
So I said, for people out there that really want to go and blow up things, you and I are not what they're looking for this week on TV.
Well, I think it's important to remember this. And by the way, I think a lot of this dissent about this possible attack, you want to absolve Obama, but
Oh, no, I don't want to absolve him. I
remember
just
th-
think
remember this.
he isn't the hit guy only.
the people are not only won from all these wars, and well, they should be. None of them have turned out well. I mean, look at Iraq. Now, we thought there were mass weapons of destruction in there. Everybody thought that. That's why everybody was on board with the attack. It turned out there wasn't anything there. But still, we went in. Well, we deposed Saddam Hussein. The man hung on TV, by the way. I don't know if you remember seeing the actual hanging. It was on television. And after that, we pulled out too quick. And what is Iraq doing today? Iraq's a mess again today. You got Al-Qaeda over there. You've got all of the related factions. So why was our blood and treasure spilled over there? Just think of that for a second.
Yeah.
Same thing. I mean, if you look at what could happen here, your sons and your daughters, for what? For a civil war that doesn't involve us.
Countries that have been...
Let me just say, if
yeah.
Syria gets worse,
Yeah.
then I think you might pick up more momentum. You might get a coalition, etc. The real thing we have to worry about is not Syria. That guy's just a puppet. They're waging war over there.
Yeah.
Iran is what we have to worry about. What we ought to do is get together with Israel and take out Iran's nuclear
Oh,
facility.
here we go again. You're
That's
going
what
back
we
to
should
war.
do.
You just
No,
dropped
you don't
a
want
bomb.
them
You want
getting
to drop
it.
a bomb?
You don't want to get
You
them.
want to hit him with a
getting
big bomb, Joe?
I'm not a technician in the the arms that are used. I
Yeah.
just use pistols, rifles, and shotguns.
Yeah.
We discussed that in the last
Yes,
show.
we did.
Yeah, I don't know about
Our
artillery.
ratings are up because of it. Joe.
Yeah, I don't know about the artillery and the rest of it, but clearly, Don, that is a huge concern, and I think
Yeah.
everybody admits that. But let's before we leave this issue, I wanted
See, I don't want to go to war with anybody.
before we leave the issue,
Yeah.
something that I think I told you just quickly before our show, and that is that
Oh, yes, you got
about an
some
hour
new-
or two ago,
Yeah, okay.
Hillary Clinton made a speech. She had apparently been in a meeting with Obama.
Okay.
Now, why she was in a meeting with Obama, I don't know. She's not the Secretary of State now, but she was in a meeting with Obama. She came out and said that the Russians have proposed to the United States that if Syria agreed to put all their chemical weapons under international control,
Yeah.
how would the U.S. feel about that? Now, if that were the case, if that could be done,
It's giving him an out.
yeah. Well, it's given Obama now.
That's
too.
what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm referring
As
to.
well as,
Yeah. Not Hillary.
would you at that point agree to that?
I'd agree to anything that would keep us away from dropping
Yeah.
bombs when another nation...
100 cruise missiles? on 5 different ships. By the
And
way,
tha- and
China's
that's, and
got
then
several
somebody,
ships.
and somebody throws something at our ships and sinks one of our ships, and guess what we are as of that moment?
Oh,
We're at war.
it's awful, yeah. Well, I think we're at war with the attack, but anyway, what would you like
Well,
to
that- yeah.
go on from here to, oh, let me just mention, if I may, just quickly,
No.
Benghazi. Benghazi. Now, I don't know
Yeah,
if
I
you
know.
know this, but this coming Wednesday is the 1-year anniversary.
Yes, and I know that people,
Up in God.
they're writing books on it now, and
Yeah,
you're getting
yeah, I mean-
inside information.
That's another reason why the people aren't in a hurry to get behind Barack Obama, because he hasn't shown any wisdom in dealing with these situations. The Benghazi thing, you know, a lot of people are looking at that 4 Americans dead,
Yeah.
and that one American whose mother keeps coming on TV. You know, my heart reaches out to her too, asking, what happened to my son? Why haven't I gotten the real story on what happened to my son? Why didn't you send somebody
which mother is this?
save my son?
Which-
This was the operations officer, not the 2 Marines and not the
Okay.
ambassador,
Oh,
but
all
the
right.
other one. His name escapes me at the moment.
Okay, but that was the operations officer.
Yes, the one that wasn't the 2 SEALs and the
Right.
ambassador.
Right.
And I've seen her on multiple times.
Yeah.
And she said, please let me know what happened to my son. Well, they promised to get back to her. The FBI did. You know, everybody did. They never, it still hasn't happened. Now, here's the thing, okay? There were no rescue attempts made. And it's been proven that there was the opportunity to send a rescue mission. And in fact, if they had done it in a timely basis, at least the other 3, other than the ambassador, would still be alive, because they were killed in the second phase of it when they went to another facility.
Right.
The administration covered up the attack for weeks because of the presidential election, Dawn. There was no other reason. They did not want, after President Obama came out and said, we've got Al-Qaeda on the run, to have a smirch like this on their record going into the election. And you remember this issue with the former secretary there coming out on 5 news shows saying it was over a video, and they knew right away, you know, the second day what had happened, and that in fact it was an attack by the bad faction there. Now, no one has been arrested for the attack. It's been a year. President Obama promised that these people were going to be held accountable and they were going to be brought to justice. Apparently they know who they are. They still haven't arrested them. What's worse is that they know where they are because they're giving interviews to reporters. So why haven't we done anything?
You know,
Why haven't we
John,
gone after
the more we look into these things, I think we find out this. Presidents don't do good at war. They just don't. One of the best presidents we ever had probably was one that no one says anything bad or good or anything else about, Lyndon Baines Johnson, because of Vietnam. And now you look at Bush landing on a landing in a plane with a little outfit on, cute little outfit, and it was
On the battleship?
Yeah, didn't he look cute?
Yeah.
And he goes,
Well, he was a pilot, you know.
I
It
know he
wasn't
was.
Halloween.
Yeah, he almost flew that
That
plane.
was his
He almost
costume.
flew that plane. He did when it was at but landing it and taking off, he didn't. Well, and there was a guy behind him doing it. You just keep your head down, Mr. President. And anyway, he landed there and he said, "The war, we have won. The war is over." Presidents, including Obama, don't do well with war. So if you're looking at any
think-
president, name me a president that did good at war. There are people who don't believe
Eisenhower.
Roosevelt. Well, he
did
wasn't
good in the
president
war.
at the time. What he did was, the irony of the situation was, he ran on a platform of,
Yeah.
I will end this war.
Yeah.
Well, how long has he been dead, and how long has the war been going on? And the war never. No president ends up looking good at war. And the reason is, the oldest rule of war is this: when the plan is drawn up, it is perfect until the first shot is fired.
That's
And
what I'm worried about.
And I'm just saying, that's the way it is. So
That's exactly
when you
what
go
I'm worried
back
about
to
with
things
this
that,
Syria thing.
yeah, no, but
Yeah.
you go back to something which happened, and you're not that you are Republican, but you're sounding very Republican, because the Republicans can't get enough of this situation that occurred where the ambassador was killed. They can't do it. I'll give you another guy
But
that,
you understand, of course, that there are more Democrats backing this attack than there are Republicans.
no, I don't understand.
You know that?
No, I don't know that.
You don't know that?
No, I don't know.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
You got some homework to do.
because their
For the next
president
show,
is
I want
Democratic.
the Congress's record
Yeah.
of him endorsing
Yeah.
George Bush's
no, I'm
war.
not going to do
and
the
I want-
homework. You do the homework.
No, I didn't get this
You
far
threw
by
the
doing my
flag,
homework. I did this far by copying off of the guy next to me like you. That's the way I got as far as I got.
Listen,
But-
Don,
yeah.
four officials
Okay.
in that incident were put on administrative leave after the attack
I know,
with pay.
yeah.
With pay.
Yeah.
Now they are all back on the job in the same positions that they left. That's the only thing that happened in Benghazi, courtesy of John Kerry,
But
our
that's
new
what I mean.
Secretary of
But
State.
I'll tell you something,
They
which,
did an investigation of that, as you know, numerous investigations. And they never
write
questioned the
books.
Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton. She ran the whole department. They never questioned her. What kind of investigation
they
is
did
that?
question her, and she got rather feisty with them, I thought. I thought it was ill-advised.
No,
but
that was in committee. I'm
Yeah.
talking about in the actual investigation. Now remember, I was a bank examiner. I know what an investigation is. I know what an examination is. They never questioned her, Dawn. That's the thing. Never questioned.
you know,
Still no one in our government has been held
I'll
accountable.
give you one to think about, John, if you want to. There was a professional football player that enlisted in the service and went to war and passed up on $1 million probably of a contract and went over to war. He was killed in action. And the initial report was, well, Mr. Bush was in, I'm sorry to say, coming back and saying that he was killed in action, he was a hero, he should have some, kind of find out he was killed by friendly fire.
Yeah.
And if you want to know about your situation, how about this situation? How much did the Bush administration go into trying to find out how that thing evolved? I don't know if any arrests or any questioning
How what of all?
of killing this young man.
Oh.
He's dead. And his family, his mother would like to know
Yeah.
who killed my son.
I'm not aware of that situation.
Well, I'm just saying that, yes, he was killed. Yes, they agree
Yeah.
that it was friendly fire. Friendly fire is part of war. You're taking one incident, which as
No,
I
but
say,
this
you're not a
was just-
Republican, John, but you're sounding very much like one today. Because you're taking that one incident of war, which is
Well, you know,
chaotic.
But Don, you know, as far as political parties go, I'm kind of like Rocky. I love everybody. You know, certain aspects.
No, but this
of
situation which you bring up is something which, you know, it's almost like thinking of the Maine. I mean, you could keep going back.
But listen,
the
you
the
can't-
Gulf of Tonkin,
All right.
the Bay of Pigs.
Right.
You go back through any one of these things
The
that
Bay
the
of Pigs,
military
yeah.
get involved
Yeah.
in. And
But Don, this was a lot different.
this
than,
was more
you
important
know,
than the other.
I feel
than-
bad for the soldier that was killed by friendly fire, and you're right, that happens a lot. And there should be an explanation for that, obviously, to the family.
I'm telling
But
you,
this
war doesn't get
situation-
explained,
This
though.
situation here
Yeah.
wasn't just a anecdotal event.
no.
The ambassador had been begging for more security at this embassy for, you know, months and months, over a year. And
well.
it fell on deaf ears. And guess who got him over there in the first place? Secretary of State Clinton wanted him to go over there and open up a full-time embassy, even in spite of the perils that were there. And when he needed the help, he never got it. And then what made it worse, this wasn't somebody, again, friendly fire. They could have launched from several different sites support to save the lives of the 2 Navy SEALs and the operations officer, and somebody said stand down. We still don't know who said stand down. Why? Again, they were hoping that this thing would just disappear. They tried to cover it up with this tape. That didn't work, but it got through the election, and then since then, they've been playing backup, trying to
Which is the nature of, I'm trying to say.
figure out what's going on.
You won't give me that point, but I'm just going to say it one more time.
Well, I understand your
War
point, but
is
this
chaos.
was different.
Oh, nothing is different than chaos in war, because that's just the.
Yeah, but
there was a
Don,
show one time
okay.
where they actually showed in Afghanistan soldiers down in a valley, And the reporters came down and interviewed those guys. Later on, 40% of them were killed in action because they were in a valley. And the question is, why are you in the valley? Because military war is establish the high ground. And they were in
Right.
the low ground. And
Right.
they said, well, the politicians guaranteed these village people that they would have representation, and that's why we're here. I think, as a matter of fact, one of the young men, I think one of them received the Medal of Honor for surviving it. He did survive it. He's one of the few that our local, Sergeant Monty did not survive. But this young man did survive. But it was in that valley, I believe that's where he was, and that's why he got the Medal of Honor, because the situation was incredible. War's incredible, John. If
I know.
Now, I'm going to say...
You're right or no, listen, I will grant you, that these things,
These happen.
they can't happen, but there is a line between chaos and incompetence. And when you get into the incompetence part, somebody should be held accountable. My point is that President Obama came on TV right after that and said, we're going to get these people that did this, they're going to be held accountable, etc. It's been a year. And again, my hat goes out to that.
I'll give you
that
one more
gentleman's
because we're
mother.
counterpoint just for the fun of it. There was a young lady who was undercover, and she had people under her charge.
Right.
And it is the occupation of the other side to find out who are these people, and they didn't think it was her. Her husband went to Africa, and he was the one who came back and said, there is no weapon of mass destruction, no such thing. And because the administration, president and vice president at that time, decided to take vengeance on him, there was nothing they could do to him, because he had the facts that there were no, because they had already launched an attack on it, as you say, and I don't say that they didn't believe that they were correct at the time. So the vice president at that time divulged the name of the man's wife. And she then was no longer a spy, but not only was
Right.
she no longer a spy,
Right.
but people who she
I did
dealt
hear
with,
about that.
people who she dealt with were suddenly in an awful lot of trouble.
Sure.
Why, John, why didn't we investigate and find out how many of those spies that were under her charge
Right.
were maybe disappeared, were killed?
No, that's
Why
right.
was the vice president of the United States at that time not being charged with treason? That's an act of war. I look at these people that there was one guy that spent a few weeks in the Russian, what was it?
Who's got
Somewhere, I don't know
Yeah.
where he was. but to me, and we keep saying, well, he divulged cigarettes. The vice president, he didn't give up a spy, to my knowledge. He didn't say that this person here, who people are under, he didn't cause them death, and yet the vice president of the United States is walking around now, former vice president, still giving advice on how to run the country. And he divulged a spy. To my way of thinking, he was a traitor as of that
for the
moment.
most part, Don, let's face it, the American people really don't have a clue
They don't.
of what's going on behind these closed political doors. They don't have a clue. They would be shocked in some cases if they knew what was happening and what deals were being made and what targets were being
I know,
set.
I know.
They
Because
would be
it's so
shocked.
easy to second guess
Let me-
when you're
let me
not
give
in the chair.
That's right. Now, let me give you an example, for instance. As soon as this talk about Syria came up, they had John Kerry go into the Congress.
You're lucky young John Kerry wasn't going against them, by the
I
way.
know. Testify in front of the committee.
Yeah.
I believe it was the Senate committee, and I believe it was the Foreign Relations Committee. Yeah. And he had a couple of other officials with him, the general, and I think it was the Secretary of Defense, if I recall correctly. And half of the questions that were asked, now we would see this because I saw it, it was on C-SPAN. Half of the questions that were asked, you know what the response was? That's classified.
Okay.
We can't tell
I
you.
know.
That's classified. We should tell you that in closed
session. We should tell you that in closed session. One of the questions which really irritated me, now remember, they're trying to make a case here to the American people, too. All this stuff is classified. If this is such a simple attack,
It didn't
Right.
work though, John.
With
because the
rockets, why
people-
should it
the
be
people-
classified?
Because the people aren't buying it anymore.
no,
Isn't
they're
it
not
nice to
buying it,
know?
and I'm glad they're not
Yeah.
buying it. But here's one thing that really got to me. Somebody actually asked them, well, if you fire those missiles, now that Assad will have had 2 weeks to reposition all of his
Won't
assets.
there be civilians?
Yeah. Well,
they
have
can
you
t-
made a tally on the number of civilians that would be killed?
And they have.
They have. They said yes, and they said, what is that? We'd have to tell you behind closed doors. Don't you think the Americans deserve to hear
I
that?
know.
What if they said, yeah,
I
well, you know, we're probably going to kill another 10,000 children,
Yeah.
but it's for good reason. Would that change the minds? You know what I'm saying?
No, but it has always been that, see, the problem is when you send people to Washington, they automatically think when the plane lands that they're smarter than you and I, and all those people out there watching. People out there watching, aren't you lucky? Those people landing in those planes are smarter than you. But now that they have to make a decision, suddenly they're not so sure they feel smarter than you. The newly elected senator. Oh, what a time.
Look, no,
he
no.
voted president, right? They'll never let him live that
You-
down.
you
Voted-
realize
He
you-
was president, by the way.
You realize that at the beginning of this, President Obama had no intention of going to the Congress.
That's right, because he thought he had the British,
That's right.
but he didn't have the British.
That's right. So the only time he decided to go to the Congress
I know.
was after he
I know.
realized he was going in alone and he needed cover.
Yeah,
Is that politics?
yeah.
I think that's politics.
You know,
That's-
it
no,
isn't
but-
funny because it isn't funny. Why am I laughing then? But it is funny sometimes when you realize people that are very, very bright, who really believe they're smarter than the people out there, suddenly get caught in a situation like deer in the headlights. Like,
Right.
what did I said I readily admitted, tongue in the cheek, foot in the mouth. And they got their foot in their mouth now, and they're trying to get back out of there.
I don't want to lose my son or any other American son because somebody put their foot in their mouth. There's got to be a lot more to it than that, in my opinion.
As you would feel about friendly fire, as you
Yes.
would feel about giving up one of your own American spies. Only in America could a guy give up his own spy and still come off like people listening to him like he knows what he's talking about. I
It's
mean,
amazing, isn't it?
well, it's enough to make you wonder.
Do you want to talk about Korea?
Well, I can't be in a way
Or,
if you
or
want-
charter schools? Or?
Well, yeah, we've got time to
got a
talk
little
about either
time.
one. Why don't we go? Korea is back into the frying pan again. Let's get into the civilian life of the world and talk a little bit about charter schools.
Okay.
Charter schools were established because they believe that the public schools aren't performing the task. They want to have a system where students and parents, therefore, can send their child wherever they want to send them. And the other school systems may accept children into their schools, but where they work for the local citizens, they have limited numbers. I'll give you a classic example, which people out there who understand education in Bridgewater, Raynham know. West Bridgewater. West Bridgewater has, percentage-wise, one of the highest increases of students in Massachusetts. It is a lottery system to get into the West Bridgewater system. By the way, interestingly enough, they do not accept students just on academic scores. If you've got an average of A+, that doesn't mean you're getting into the West Bridgewater. And by the way, there are numbers of students each year from Bridgewater and Raynham who apply for the West Bridgewater school system. It's one of the best in the state.
I know it is.
And so they do it on a lottery system. So they're even more fair probably than charter schools because they just pick the name out of the hat and those are the ones that will go there.
I have a neighbor that lives right next door to me that
goes
sent
to
her
West-
2 boys to West Bridgewater.
And they actually have to get them there. There's no school bus. They have to get them there and pick them up at night and bring them home. And they're there, John, because they won the lottery. That's why they're there. And we have people who graduate from West Bridgewater and people who are sports and academic, and they're all doing very, very well. Does it mean ours is terrible? No, I'm not trying to say that. I'm not trying to say ours is terrible. I don't believe it is. I'm just saying that there are parents who are not satisfied with school systems
Right.
in the whole state of Massachusetts. And that's, I used West Bridgewater almost as a charter school. That created charter schools. I am for them in a fashion, but I'm against them in another fashion. So I will be interested, first of all, to hear your input as to charter schools, John.
Yeah, I'm not, of course, you were a teacher
Yes.
for many, many years, and from what I understand, a good teacher.
Well, I would like to think so.
Yeah.
I gave myself a good plus.
I don't want to praise you too much, but that's what I've heard. I would say that I did do a little research on it just to try to familiarize myself with some of the aspects and the arguments. And one thing that I learned is, first of all, there's an argument out there. A lot of people are misled by thinking that these charter schools take money from the public schools when the kids switch. But in effect, the money that's allocated to the kids in the public schools goes with them. So it's not like it's going to raise your taxes to fill the gap because the money has gone with them. So they try to make it a
It is
neutral-
money you would have received,
Right,
but you won't receive it.
right. We are, but then you don't have the students either.
And that depends on class sizes, whether you're
Right.
a win-win situation. Because if you have a class size too large, then yes, when they go, that's
Yeah.
okay. But if you have a small class size and they take their $9,000 to give it a number
Yeah.
with them, you could well have put
Well-
that child in there and gained $9,000 towards the teacher.
And I understand that these are, for the most part, they're public schools, and they're open to any student free of charge. And
Yes, they are, charter schools.
yeah, and there's no entrance exams.
No.
But you might not know this. Charter schools enroll twice the percentage of poor and minority students as district schools. Did you know that?
Well, I'm trying to handle
That's
where the
internet
charter
research.
school is, because if the charter school is in Roxbury, say,
Right.
then yes,
Yeah,
the
but why-
people they
why-
receive, the
why would it-
number-wise across the board.
Why would it enlist more minority and poor students than the district schools in those areas?
I'd look at that one and the way it was written to see whether it's.
That's a
what-
direct quote.
I understand.
Yeah.
No, I understand. it.
Now, also, did you know that those schools, charter schools, receive 20% less funding than district schools?
There are those who believe that it is an attempt to break the unions,
Yes, right.
and it receives 20% less because the teachers are being paid.
That cuts both
20%.
ways, doesn't it? And I think that when we get to the end part here,
Yeah.
I think that where we may have some disagreement, I think.
Oh, I think there's a disagreement pending here.
Well, because I favor charter schools. I think if you haven't
And
figured it out-
I'm not opposed to
Right.
charter schools.
But I'll tell you why I favor
not
them
in
mostly.
favor of
These
them,
are
but I'm
all
not
nice things.
opposed to them.
Now, independent studies show these schools have been a most effective tool to close the gap between poor and minority kids and affluent white kids. That's been demonstrated in independent studies. And they just flat out say charter schools are clearly superior in the academic achievements of their students. Now, I think you'd agree with that, wouldn't you?
No, oh yeah, no, I'm not opposed. I'm
Yeah.
not opposed to any of
Yeah.
your statistics or any of their statistics. Here's the. I say that I'm not opposed to them, but I think we have to be very careful with them, because if we, and there are those who run politically on a campaign of more charter schools in our districts, they want to do that. You say that it doesn't cost the district any money, but Johnny goes to Bridgewater, Raynham. We keep picking on, but they're our hometown. We can do that. 9,000's coming in, and Johnny then goes to the charter schools, and so therefore the 9,000 doesn't go there. As the charter schools increase, and as the number of dollars, instead of coming into Bridgewater, Raynham, go to the charter school, the town of Raynham and Bridgewater receive less money towards their education, which weakens down the payment on this building we're sitting in, the bond. We have less money to pay for our bond. We have less money to pay for the teachers. We have less money to pay for the staff and the janitors. We have less money for everything. And so therefore, if you water down the schools too much, then pretty soon you have a system that it's like you've prophesized a failure. You got your failure because you've watered it down to such a degree.
Okay, that's a fair point.
Well, that's the point
I
that
can-
I've got
I
about
can
charter
understand where
schools,
that would
to be
happen.
careful.
However,
Yeah.
Is that bad? Because when you look at it,
Well, it is
I think
bad
what it comes
because,
down to, you know what the difference is here, in my opinion? Unions.
well,
Because the unions are always
Yeah.
acting in the best interest of the teachers. The charter schools appear to be acting in the best
gee, you
interest
sound like a Republican.
of the students.
You sure you're an independent?
Yes, I'm an
Okay,
independent,
all right.
little libertarian, little Republican, and a touch of Democrat.
A little touch of very little touch of Democrat. Well, anti-union has gone back since we got to have a show someday on anti-union because then we can really get
Yeah.
involved in it.
But Don,
I'm trying to
isn't
stay.
it true?
No,
If
no,
you
no.
can produce
Yeah.
students, you'll see the logic in this. If you can produce students with
I'm
better,
going to give you an answer you're not ready for.
with
but go
better
ahead.
academic
Yeah.
achievement,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you spend as a town 20% less on
Hmm.
the teachers' salaries. Why in the world wouldn't you find something like that attractive? You know what the difference is? The difference is unions. The unions are going to push, the teachers want more and more pay, but the kids don't always benefit
Got a
from
yellow
that.
bubble up here. I'm just going to bubble on the balloon. As the charter schools get larger
Yes.
and they begin to employ more people,
Mm-hmm.
and suddenly up stands one guy, Johnny Jones, who said,
I want to unionize? Is that what you're going to say?
yes, I want to unionize. Now,
Well, see that-
are you going to say to him, no, you can't because you're in a charter schools and charter schools are better because they don't have unions?
but
Unions are better. No, you're not. I'm going to tell you what you're going to do by law. You're going to allow them to vote. How? They're going to vote and they're going to vote it up or down. And you got to be careful how you train and how you take care of Johnny Jones because he has every right in the world to say he has a right to a union.
Well-
And they vote that for the union, and suddenly charter schools have unions, and the union talk is totally gone.
See, but I think a lot of the people in charter schools understand the contributions
Is
or
that what
lack
they do?
thereof of the unions to start
Just
with.
before they leave to make a living.
Well, yeah, just before they leave to make a living.
Because they're making.
Dawn,
Yeah.
you know, there's got to be gratification. If I'm a teacher, let's look at it from the teacher's perspective. If I've got a real conscientious teacher that wants to teach kids,
Yes.
okay?
He would never
Not
join a
just
union.
concerned about their salary or their tenure, but they really want to teach kids.
He'd never join a union.
Probably not going to join the union anyway. And yeah, aren't they going to be proud to know that the achievements of their students? I mean, I don't know. You're the teacher.
You know,
I'm not
John,
the teacher. But what's the most important
Pride
thing?
cannot buy you a meal.
No, it
Pride
cannot, but-
pay your rent. It can't you buy a house.
Yeah.
It cannot help you in your
Now,
retirement. Pride.
somehow buried in that statement,
Okay.
I think, is your understanding and probably belief that you.
You're trying to
when-
burst my balloon.
I'm burst. Yeah.
We got a minute and 36 to
Oh,
click
do
on
we?
the balloon.
Okay. But
I know.
weren't you proud when your students achieved something in particular? Didn't that make you proud as a teacher? Isn't that what drives a teacher? Other than the unions and the salaries?
We're going to have to take this up the first thing the next show unless there's a war. Because
right.
that's getting involved in what makes anybody tick who
Yeah.
who does any job at
Yeah, but
all.
why do you become a
And-
teacher if it's not for the money, Dawn? You
Well,
and
when I
both
went
agree.
into
you don't get
teaching,
rich
I
teaching.
cut my pay in half.
Okay.
That is why teachers end up working that second job.
All right, so what else is good about it? It must be,
Well, we've got
teaching
52 seconds to find out
Okay.
what's good.
Well,
So
yeah,
I'm going to tell you,
I'll let you go.
this isn't even a tease because people say, I don't care about charter schools. But John and I are going to talk charter schools the next time around. See how it got, when Republicans, when you talk to them about charter schools, it gets back to union, it gets back to union. It's union. It's all about the union. It has nothing to do with charter schools. It has nothing to do with the kids doing better or worse. It has to do with those nasty old union people who maybe created some, I don't know what they call it, the middle
No,
class.
but it's
They
more
created the middle class.
performance-oriented, too, let's face it. I mean, you must have known teachers that
Thank
weren't
you
worth-
very much for what you're going to
Yes,
thank
all-
people for watching.
Look,
And
this
the
may
next
carry
time
over
around,
into the next
this
show.
we're going to be on YouTube. Is that
Yeah.
what you call it? We're
Yeah,
going to be on YouTube.
YouTube, yeah.
Thank you very much. See you next time.
Have a good one. Thanks for joining us.
See you.